I agree. Fundamentalism is bad. I think we're pretty much all agreed on that. But you didn't really answer the question of why fundamentalists turn on this country specifically as a target.
Because they hate this country and they hate our allies and they hate the West.
It was not Buddhists who flew planes into the Twin Towers. It was not Hindus or Jews that blew up the London Underground buses a few years ago. And that simple fact has to be acknowledged if you're even going to start a dialogue. We do have a problem. We have a problem when the failures of Islam throughout the world, the failures of all Islamic societies come here into Britain. Their intolerance of freedom of conscience, their intolerance of apostates, their intolerance of freedom of expression and freedom of speech, their intolerance of minorities, other religious minorities, sexual minorities, their intolerance of gays, their dislike and distrust of half of the population, women, and many, many other things. And the call, what's more, for a parallel legal system within Britain and European societies. This is monstrous. No other group behaves like this.
Do you feel more comfortable living under American law, or do you feel more comfortable living under Sharia law?
Sharia law.
I'm a Muslim. I prefer Sharia law. Sharia law, yes.
You prefer Sharia law over American law?
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah.
And do you find most of your friends feel the same way?
Yeah, of course. If you're Muslim, yeah.
Everyone agree. Everyone agree. Brothers and sisters. Subhanallah. So it's not just these radical sheikhs then. Allahu Akbar. Next question. How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, if it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind. And that is what we should apply in the world. Who agrees with that?
Many young people in this poverty-stricken region have been radicalized by Islamist extremists who ban their followers from voting or sending their children to school and encourage them to fight the state.
We saw our houses burned and they started beheading people. We ran away. Our home is far from here and it took us about 2 weeks to get here.
Now she's among hundreds hoping to find food and shelter here at a centre for displaced people near the town of Pemba. Everyone tells similar stories. Musa Asane says the fighters abducted many children. He was lucky to escape with his.
They wouldn't let us leave. Then they took us to a school and read out our names. Then they beheaded them with a machete while everyone was watching.
The attackers are from armed groups who say they want to create an Islamic state.
More than 50 people have been beheaded in northern Mozambique by militant Islamists. According to reports, the militants turned a football pitch in a village into an execution ground where they decapitated and chopped bodies. The beheadings are the latest in a series of gruesome attacks that the militants have carried out in gas-rich Cabo Delgado province since 2017. Witnesses told local media that the militants had driven residents of one village onto the football pitch before murdering them there. The militants also reportedly abducted women and children. The militants are linked to the Islamic State group, giving it a foothold in southern Africa.
The rest of the country has borne the brunt of Al-Shabaab's violence, the worst in recent history being the October 2017 bombing in the capital of Mogadishu, which killed over 500 people. Kismayo has been relatively peaceful by comparison, a peace that has now been shattered with yesterday's bloodshed.
And then Hamas's terrorists came with vehicles from there, pickups like ISIS, motorcycles and paragliders that came shooting with automatic machine guns, trying to kill and murder as many as possible. But then they did even worse. They collected people, put them in a container and lit them on fire. They went to the bathrooms and shot just the bathrooms to kill people. They tied people with their hands behind their back, put them in a line and shot them in the head.
Hundreds of people were killed over a few hours that the Hamas terrorists were trying to create a carnage around this place. the people were dehumanized, they were tortured, and the terrorists found some unimaginable sadistic pleasure in killing them, but not right away, but torturing them, ensuring that they are, most of them die a very painful death.
Islamic culture has given us majestic arches and soaring spires, timeless poetry and cherished music, elegant calligraphy, and places of peaceful contemplation. And throughout history, Islam has demonstrated through words and deeds the possibilities of religious tolerance and racial equality.
The Quran, which incidentally, if you read, demonstrates Islam is a peaceful and harmonious religion.
Islam is a religion of peace.
Islam is a religion of peace.
Muslims are peaceful and tolerant people and have nothing whatsoever to do with terrorism.
Now this is a list of terrorist attacks where people were killed per year. Have a look at this. Should we just scroll through it? It keeps going and going and going. This is 1 year, by the way. Around the world. Syria, Nigeria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, India, Pakistan, England, Mali, on and on and on. Let's just scroll and scroll and scroll. This is 1 year, everyone. 1 year where there's been killings in the name of Allah.
Implement the Sharia law, we'll have less crime, we'll have less problems, we'll live a beautiful society.
The Swedish government and media have long suppressed bad news about immigration, but it all blew up in a major scandal when the public learned that sexual assaults by migrant males against Swedish girls at a summer music festival last year had been covered up.
Now, burnt cars is, just like several other crimes in Sweden, something that is relatively new. It started happening about 10, maybe 20 years ago, and for several years, media and politicians were very successful when it comes to hiding the problem.
But I would have to say that anybody who at this point still refuses to make the link between migration and the rise that we're seeing in crime in Sweden either lives in an ivory tower or has an interest in trying to cover up the truth. Because we're not just talking about lethal gun violence here. I mean, we're talking about gang wars that are being fought out in the streets of Sweden, explosions, knife crime, and not to say the least, soaring numbers of rapes as well.
So Sweden goes from one of the safest places in the world to the second most dangerous country in Europe after Kosovo, and the people who run the country pretend it's not happening. So I guess they don't care about the people who live in Sweden.
Well, I mean, that's the only conclusion that you can take from this. They care more about being in power.
At least a dozen police officers have been injured in the clashes so far. Sweden's national police chief said he'd never seen such violent riots on his streets before.
It's a very sizable minority of the Muslim population of this country hold views
attitudes and beliefs that run completely contrary to our civilization and our culture. And it's not getting better. People used to say, oh, well, this is just first immigration Muslims. Their children and grandchildren will be very different. On the contrary, it's the children today who hold far more radical views than their parents or grandparents. I mean, there was one poll done by the Policy Exchange that showed, this is quite unbelievable, 1/3 of young British Muslims aged 16 to 24 believe ex-Muslims should be put to death for apostasy. This is quite amazing. A majority of British Muslims believe that homosexuality should be illegal, compared to 5% of the broader population. 3/4 of British Muslims in this last poll do not believe that Hamas committed murder and rape on October the 7th. Now, you might think that's a bizarre thing for them to believe, but actually it's in keeping with previous polls. 31% of British Muslims believe that America was behind 9/11. 7% believe it was the Jews. Only 4% believe it was Al-Qaeda, which of course we know. Then you look further and you see that 62% of Muslims want to restrict free speech in order to protect religious sensitivities. 52% believe that there should be no picture of Muhammad shown. Every gauge you look at, most scarily, 9% of British Muslims, 400,000 people, identify as being Islamists and supporters of terrorism, and 15% sympathise with terrorism, compared to 6% in France and Germany. And 81% of British Muslims identify as Muslim first and British second, whereas it's only 66% in Germany and it's only 46% in France. We have a real issue here which we need to address, and we can't keep covering these things up.